I saw a really interesting movie yesterday, which is how I could probably start any review of anything that I saw that was interesting. But it's true. I saw a really interesting film and it was a ton of fun. I went in mostly blind and boy did I have a blast. This is called Riddle of Fire. This is a film starring pretty much nobody you would probably recognize. There was only really one actress in the whole film I recognize from other things. It stars really predominantly three or four little kids who are, let's say they're actors. They're in a movie, technically they're actors, but they're really natural. It's like you're just watching three little kids. Three kids, directed by Weston Razooli. This is his feature film debut. He's also in the film. And it's this weird kind of, it's set in the real world, but it has fantastical elements to it. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. The basic story here is these three little kids are on dirt bikes and they drive around with paintball guns, and they've just heisted this new gaming system from their local, let's call it a Walmart, and all they want to do is spend the afternoon playing their video game. The mother of the house where all these kids, the mother of two of the kids, it's two boys and a girl, the mother of the two boys, where they're getting ready, they've got their spread, they got their soda, they've got their candy, they've got their cakes, they're ready to sit down and play video games all day, but the TV password protected. So they go to very nicely ask their mother for the password, and she says, "I'm sick, you can't play video games, but if you go get me a pie, my favorite blueberry pie from the local bakery, I'll let you play for 2 hours. But then you have to go outside because it's a nice day." Thus begins an epic journey, an odyssey, if you will, for these three kids. All they want to do is get a pie, and one thing after another gets in their way, and they're off on a quest to make this happen. And it's wild, it's wacky, it's a little kid profanity on occasion, and there's perhaps even a little magic and witchcraft involved in this film. It was wonderful. Shot on 16 millimeter film. It looks like a film. If it wasn't for two things, if it wasn't for the video game and how that looks, and if it wasn't for, I think, a cell phone being used in the film, you would swear this came from 1986. This feels like a Goonies or a Monster Squad without the polish, but that's okay. That's good. It didn't feel forced to me. A lot of films trying to do what this movie did, they feel really forced and aggressively quirky or aggressively bad or aggressively edgy. This had none of that. This is, it just feels authentic, and the kids are great and they're funny. One of the kids is a little kid with a speech impediment, and he's subtitled for the whole movie. And but the quality of the filmmaking is good. It feels like a little scrappy indie kind of film. I was laughing out loud repeatedly throughout the film. It threw me so many curveballs that I never saw coming because, again, I only knew the basic idea. What I told you is a little bit more than I knew going into this. And it was a blast. Strangely or interestingly, this is being distributed and made available to theaters on 35 millimeter film, which is not very common anymore. So I was able to see this at the Roxy Theater in Tribeca in New York on 35 millimeter. 35 millimeter isn't common anymore, but I do wonder if theaters that have 35 are going to be playing this on 35. Looked great. And this is what's interesting. It's been out for maybe a week as I record this. I don't know if the spicks and speckles and lines that I saw in this print, which was not much really at all, but the little defects in the print, I don't know if that was the result of this film having been playing on film for a while in this theater, or if that was printed into the film to make it look slightly old. It's not like Grindhouse and movies that try to do that, where they throw in the kitchen sink with all these effects to make it look beat up. It just looked like a print that had been around for a little while, which added to me to the effect, the subtlety of that, added to the effect of this feeling like it was a film that had been around for 30 or 40 years. So I really enjoyed this. I don't want to say too much about it other than it's, it's rated R. There's no nudity. There's no real brutal violence in the film or anything. There's just a little bit of profanity. There's an F word, maybe one or two F words in it. So would I say it's for kids? Yeah, I kind of would. This is the kind of movie as a kid I would have loved to see. And as a kid, I wasn't one of those kids. The belief has come along or been handed down from somebody who isn't really correct, that kids won't watch anything unless it's about kids. Maybe kid culture has changed for that to be true. But when I was a kid, most of what I was watching was stuff about adults. I didn't need it to be about kids to make me interested. But I think modern kids would enjoy watching this because it's kids gone wild. It's kids on the loose. It's kids, carving out an adventure for themselves. I think adults will enjoy it because there are adult aspects to how these kids act that are pretty fun, that are very funny now that I think about it. And they remember what it was like being a kid and riding bikes. Now, these kids have dirt bikes, little trikes or motorized bikes, but it really took me back to when I was a kid and with my friends getting into trouble, not really, but getting into little adventures, riding bikes up and down the side streets in my hometown and out in the woods and whatever you find and whatever scraps you might get into. Really, really fun movie. Riddle. I keep wanting to call it Riddle of Fire. And funny enough, the font on the poster matches the Lord of the Rings font for the Ralph Bakshi movie from the late 70s. And this kind of feels like its sensibility kind of does feel late 70s to mid 80s overall. One thing I will say, surprising use of a recognizable pop tune from the 70s in the film. That I was watching the movie and I'm like, clearly this was not made for much money. And how did they ever afford that song? Then at sort of like the, if not the climax, the final sequence of the film is scored to the Cannibal Holocaust theme. That might not mean anything to you, but I'm sitting there in the theater watching this relatively cute, fun, adventurous kids film, or film about kids, and this Cannibal Holocaust music is playing, and I just started cracking up. I couldn't believe it. Half the theater probably had no idea, but it's a bold choice, and if you don't know the movie, you're just like, oh, that's really interesting retro kind of sounding film music that they've just played. So in theaters now, I believe Vinegar Syndrome was behind the release and or production of this film, so that tells me that this will be on Blu-ray from Vinegar Syndrome one day. I can't wait to get this because this was a lot of fun. See it if you can at your local indie film art house theater, Riddle of Fire.